Hello students, in this video I'm going to demonstrate a very powerful feature of Godot and in fact of most modern game engines, and that is the idea of using a tile set. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details about how tile sets work. One of the most powerful features is an auto tile set that allows it to guess what tiles should line up next to other ones, but we're just going to do something that makes what we're currently doing a little bit easier. So at the moment, when we were adding a tile, we were talking about these platforms that our player can land on. So at the moment, when we run our game, this one that we've been working on in class, we can see our player can stand on these tiles and jump onto them and so forth. And that works fine, nothing technically wrong with it. But what we had is we made a tile scene. So we had this tile scene down here. Okay, and it had a shape basically to it, a collision shape, a tile sprite shape, and it just existed for our player to stand on. The problem that we have, and the reason it's not very efficient, is when we go back to the main scene, of course, we had to keep adding multiple tile scenes into our main scene. We can see these all here in our inspector on the left-hand side. In fact, I've currently got 30 tiles just for this small section of screen. And while it works and technically is okay, it obviously fills up our scene area quite a lot. And even though we've sort of grouped them into this tiles groupage here, it's still not very efficient. It's not a great way to go about this. And there is a much more powerful way. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start by deleting all these tiles. We don't need them anymore. And in fact, I don't even need my tile scene, but I'm just going to leave it in the background there for a moment. So as I said, just deleting this, and of course, while I'm talking at the same time, I'm not looking for my delete node, so there it is. So we don't need those in the scene. So it's still there if we want to ever use it later on. But for now, we've taken them all out of our main game scene. So what are we going to do to bring this idea back? Well, we're going to add a tile set. Okay, so if we come to our main scene, we're going to add a new child node, and that child node is called Tilemap. Now, I've searched for it, and here it is, Tilemap. I'm just going to add that in. I can rename that if I want, but I'm just going to leave it as Tilemap for the moment. When I click on the Tilemap child node, you can see over here in my inspector, it has a mode which is set to square, and in most cases you'll leave that as square. And then it has a tile set. Now the tile set tells it how to physically create the tiles. So at the moment it is empty. So we're going to click on that to create a new one. I'm not going to be worried about any of the other properties for the moment, just setting up my tile set. So I'm going to click on that and choose a new tile set. Of course, if you have a tile set from a previous project, or maybe you've already made it from something else, you can just load the tile set in, or even drag one across from your file system over here, over the top, a bit like dragging in a sprite. So we're going to create a new tile set. Yeah, initially not much looks like it's happened, but we do now have a new tile set. I'm just going to click on that again to open up our tile set inspector. Now, it also opens up down the bottom here, the actual tile set window. So we're going to begin by bringing in the sprite that has our tiles. Now, we could bring in just the original tile sprite. So if I look down here, I could bring in that tile PNG that we had and just make a sprite out of that, and tile out of that. There's nothing wrong with that. But the main thing you usually do, and I'll just remove that, is you're bringing what we call a tile or a sprite sheet. And that will contain often multiple tiles. Now, the tile that we used was cut out, if you like, from a broader tile sheet, and I have a copy of that here, and this is the broader tile sheet. So you can see, if I go up just a little bit higher, here is the tile that we were using in our game, but there's lots of other tiles. So there's ones with snow on it, there's ones just dirt, there's rock looking ones, there's ladders. So this is also really useful for putting in things like scenery. Things that you don't necessarily have to directly interact with, okay? It's a great way to add those things in really quickly. So I'm basically going to now be able to cut this big sprite into individual tiles that I can use. So to do that, I'm going to add a new single tile at a time. Now there are auto tiling options that I said, and this is something that you can investigate more later on. But right now I'm just going to make basic tiles that I can use. So new single tile. it then says, right, we have to define a region. What part of this big sprite am I actually going to make as this tile? So I'm going to choose region, and you might already notice I've got the grid turned on. That's this grid here, because I have it turned on from earlier. So there's actually no lines on that sprite, but I'm turning it on to help me choose. Because now what I can do is simply click and drag over the parts that I want to be in the tile. So you can see how I can do whatever I want. So I could make a really big tile with lots of bits, although that doesn't make sense for this picture. What I want is a 2x2 grid for our tile. Okay, let's make another tile. Let's have a new tile again, and you can see there's still showing the tile I had, and I could technically choose part of that tile again, but I want to get just a dirt tile as well, so I can have just some dirt and I have one with grass on top. So I've done that. I've made two tiles now. So when I go back to my main game, and sorry, I'll just shrink down the tile set window a little bit again. So when I click back on the main scene, again, none of my tiles are there. But now when I click on Tilemap node, you can see I have some tiles that have been made. Okay, so this is what's in my tile set right now. So I have a tile that has grass on the top, and I have a tile that just has the dirt shape. And the great thing about this now is when I come into my game, you can see here's a tile I've got chosen. If I had the dirt one chosen, it'll look like that. But now instead of having to drag in scenes, I can just literally almost paint with these tiles. And it's also going to lock into this grid that I've got. So before I had a platform underneath here, so I'm just holding down my left mouse button and I'm dragging across, and it's automatically putting tiles in for me. And they line up perfectly, and I don't have to think about it. Much, much easier to manage than having to drag in the scene one by one or copy and paste scenes. So really, really quick and easy way to get what I want looks wise. And now if I also use this second tile that I made, you can see I've got this gap down the bottom that I'd normally see from my when I play my game. I can again also just paint that in to make it look a bit better. So now I've got a much more easy and powerful way of placing the tiles in my game. Okay, let's run that game and see how it works. All right, so it's looking great, but we notice our player fell through. And some of you might have already picked up why that is. So let's go back and have a look at the tile. So if I come back into my tile set, so I click on tile set and have a look, right? So I've got to click on this. This is my tile image, and then it shows me the tiles that I've made. If I go to edit and I click on this tile set that tile that I made, you might have noticed there was a collision option next. So I set a region or a shape. This is like adding the sprite basically, but I didn't add a collision to that particular tile. So of course my player fell through it. So I can click on this and again highlight over the parts that I want to be, choose a rectangular shape first, and highlight over the parts that I want to be the collision. Now if I go onto this tile and add a collision to that tile, both of those tiles should now have a collision to them. And if I was to rerun my game at this point, I now have my tile back that has a collision. Okay. Now, I mentioned before, tile sets are also great for doing things like scenery. So let's say I wanted to add one more thing to my game from that tile set. So if I go again back to my tile map, click on my tile set, click on this image again, which is my tile image, and I'll just make this a bit bigger. Let's say I wanted this bit of grass here as just a bit of scenery. So I can add another tile. I can say pick the region. Now I could just pick just those bottom two, but notice it goes through a little bit, and often you'll try and make your tiles of a similar size. I'm actually going to pick all four. Okay. I've chosen that, and that's a new tile in my game, so I can just go back to my main scene. When I click tile map, you can see I now have this here as well. So if I click that one, I can simply add some tufts of grass around my game. Now I didn't give these a collision shape, but excuse me, I didn't do that deliberately because I don't want my player, who's a kinematic body, to hit that grass and get stuck. So at the moment, when I play my game now, that grass will be there, but my player essentially just walks through it. Okay, in this case, it's walking behind it, and that's because of what we call the Z index. So the grass is at a closer Z index to my player, so I'm walking behind it. If I want to change that, I can adjust my Z index feature to make my player walk in front. But that's a really quick and easy way to add some scenery to your game. So you might have a cloud sprite and other things that your player doesn't necessarily have to interact with. Now you might just be able to notice that I do have a little bit of clipping. So my sprite is not perfectly aligned when I made my tile. So I've got a little bit of the tile from next to it. That's what this line is here. And you also might notice it with my dirt one, there's a little bit too much showing up. Okay, a little bit of white from the tile next to it. So I need to go back and adjust my tile set size just a little bit, but that is the process anyway. So if your tile set's not exactly the right size, you might need to shrink some things down. So again, if I go back to edit that tile set, okay, I might need to adjust the grid size here. It's picking up just a tiny bit of the ones next to it. Okay, so I can do that. So I could easily delete these tiles, adjust the grid that I'm choosing maybe, and re-import them, or even just go and edit the graphic a little bit to make that a little bit better. But that's the process. It works really powerfully, as you've seen, and it's overall not difficult. You can often find these kind of tile set images all over the internet that you can just bring into your game that already have multiple items packed together like this quite tightly into a single image that you essentially cut up now and turn into the tiles that you need. Okay, so that's a basic introduction to the very early parts of tiles and tile maps. As I said, it's much more powerful than that, and you are more than welcome and encouraged to investigate further. There are great tutorials online that you can follow to help you learn more and more about the features of tile maps. Thanks very much for watching this video. I suggest you go back and change your game to use a tile map instead.